also exceeded jurisdiction and had an invalid hearing in that they didn't properly notice that hearing. Now, this is being heard by the council that will go forward and approve that which was previously judged to be a invalid hearing, exceeding jurisdiction, and also the environmental aspects of both the zoning administrator, the Department of Planning environmental section, and the Area Planning Commission did not do a comprehensive enough environmental study. And I understand the process, and you have all the authority. I do object to a 10-year grant. This applicant does have unclean hands. He has consistently disregarded conditions imposed by this council by parking on streets and not for his employees and not parking in the parking lot. He's using a school that was closed for over a year, and he continues to use that school, and he just has unclean hands. And I would like to see this matter adjudicated for the welfare of the children and not for the pie in the sky of the applicant. So I would think that the 3 years and the 10-year grant is fine, but a plan approval in 10 years, what good is that going to be? If there's a problem with 200 kids in three 50-plus-year-old houses, there's a question of what his intentions are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Members. Kathy Del Don, and I represent an organization, but I'm not sure if you're supporting or against the appeal. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Deladani, and I'm representing the Tarzana Neighborhood Council. And I'm actually for the 245, in support of the 245, in modifying condition number 9. We worked closely, Tarzana Neighborhood Council and the Encino Neighborhood Council worked very closely together with the applicant with the conditions to more than adequately mitigate all the impacts in the neighborhood. We feel that it was truly mitigated, but we feel that in the Area Planning Commission, we feel that there was an undue burden placed on the applicant by asking them to complete all of the street improvements and before they were able to enroll children, additional children. We feel that this, as I said, this is an undue burden on them. We did not expect this to happen. We feel that it's a disservice to the parents who are planning to place their children in this facility. We strongly hope that you will allow this modification so that the owners will have adequate time to complete the construction without jeopardizing their child care business. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We have Ben Resnick, and then we'll have Evan Levi. And that will conclude the public hearing.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairman Reyes. My name is Ben Resnick. I represent Charles World. Very briefly, just to lay the record straight, everything's been done properly. Hearings were properly noticed. Mr. Amber's concerns are notwithstanding. Let me just point out there's been a history between this applicant and Mr. Ambers. Mr. Ambers was the consultant land use representative for this applicant for many years. Services were terminated a couple of years ago, and unfortunately he has seen fit to be rather vindictive, I would say. He has appealed every step of the way, unfortunately. This is a project, this is a facility that's been there for 31 years. It's a facility that's clean. It's a wonderful asset to the community. I would simply ask that the modifications and the conditions that have been brought forward by the council office be approved. This facility has earned that the right to be able to have the grant for the period of time and the right to expand. Not only does it have the support of 2 neighborhood councils, it also has the support of the chamber. It has local support in many of the local people who live there, send their kids there to preschool. And this is a facility that basically serves a lot of people who work in the area who drop their kids off and then come back and pick them up later. And so with that, unless there are any questions, I'll just defer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Levi, our last speaker.
I'd like to thank, my name is Evan Levy. I'm one of the owners of Child's World School, and I'd like to thank the committee for listening to us today. I'd also like to thank the councilman's office. We've worked very closely with them over the years on our facility. Child's World School has been in operation for over 30 years, and we've been the owners for about half that time. We have an excellent name in the community. All that we're asking is that we be able to post a bond for the work to be done so that we can start enrolling the children, because as you know, it's very expensive to do street sidewalks and lights and so on, and sewers and everything, and that's what we're really hoping for from today. And we're renting a facility right next door, and we'd like to be able to close that out so we don't have to make double payments. Thank you very much for hearing us today.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. And Councilmember Smith, I understand this is in your district.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. And I think the gentleman just really explained the whole case for me right there. I want to thank the neighborhood councils for both being here today and the chamber for supporting it. This is a day care center and an early education program. It's been 31 years. A good neighbor, a good community participant. They want to expand their program from 110 to 210. I objected to two things in the granting of the case from the South Valley APC, and asked that you reverse those, and that would be the prohibition on delaying the increase be removed, and that is so that they can do the work, but in a timely way without restricting the project, without delaying the use of the facility for more children. And to do that, we would ask that you ensure the completion of the required improvements. We'd ask that the applicant be allowed to post a bond, which we do all the time on these kind of projects for the improvements, and require the improvement to be completed within 2 years. And secondly, on condition, that was on condition number 9, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
On condition number 7, which limits the life of the grant to 10 years, after which a new grant would be needed to be filed in order to continue the use. This seems only kind of punitive, and therefore we'd ask that condition number, the plan approval review condition 8 requires, therefore that we request condition number 7 be changed to require an additional plan approval at 10 years as assess the conditions of the school at that time. This is not abnormal. These are the kind of things we do all the time on these cases. I think it's appropriate. I think it lets the school go forward with their program to grow, to be a really good asset to our community, and do it in a timely way without punitive and financial burden that would create for them. So I ask those changes.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Councilmember. So we could, I would move that we deny the appeal and approve the CUP with modified conditions as submitted by Councilmember Smith, District 12, and that has been submitted to the clerk. So as submitted to the clerk, and that would be my action. Have a second?
Chairman Reyes, Terry Kaufman, Macias, City Attorney's Office. You should also direct staff to add revised findings consistent with the decision that you're making today.
As stated by the city attorney, we can also add, and there's a second, and that'll be unanimous from the committee, and that'll be the action of for item number 6. And that brings us to item number 1.
Actually, Councilman, you may want to do public comment for the land use items.
Oh, okay, so the regular agenda, land use items, public comment. Anybody here for public comment? Seeing none. Now can I do this?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Well, then, Terry Kaufman, Macias, City Attorney's Office, and you should adjourn your regular meeting and then open your special.
That's why we have coaches. So we're going to adjourn the regular plum committee, and now we'll move into the joint committee, and I want to thank my colleagues for being here, and as the chairman of Budget and Finance, Councilmember Parks, do you have any introductory comments or remarks before we jump into the substance of number 1?
No, I would just say thank you for accommodating the fact that we can get this done without stretching it out, and that we would not have to put together a separate Budget and Finance. So we're pleased to see that we have a quorum of the Budget and Finance Committee here today.
Thank you. Any other comments from any of my colleagues from either committee would like to make a comment at this point before we dig in? Seeing none. Can we have the staff come forward, please? We have with us the CAO, the city attorney. We also have planning as well, building and safety.
PD.
Police department, come on down. Might have to pull out some more chairs. We have enough microphones, we can share that. Clerk. Police Department, who did we miss? City Clerk?
City Clerk.
Okay, come on down, City Clerk. I know you've all been working together as a team, and I know this is a rather new territory for all of us. So I'd like to ask one of you to begin, give the presentation, perhaps CAO.
Matt Crawford, Office of the CAO. As you know, the item before you is the work of the CAO's office, the City Clerk's office, the Department of Building and Safety, and the Police Department. We've all come together and reviewed the ordinance that the council adopted earlier this year.
Crawford, let me make sure. Do we have the LAPD here? There you go. Okay. I saw the other gentleman from our staff meetings. That's why. All right. Please. Go ahead.
We've worked together. We've reviewed the ordinance and determined a process for registering all of the collectives under the rules and regulations the council adopted, and we've determined how much the city's costs will be. And based on our best estimates of how many collectives we'll be able to get through the process, we've determined a set of fees which will reimburse the city for those costs. Very briefly, the fees that we are recommending be established at this point are Police Department live scan background review fee of $151 per person. That's not per collective, it's per applicant. So if a collective has, say, 3 names in the management of collective, that'd be $453 for combined. It's $151 per individual named. The second fee is for the city clerk. After the applicants have passed their background with LAPD, they're able to file their notice of intent to register with the clerk. The clerk's fee for that is $324 paid. Once the clerk has determined all the collectives which are able to satisfy the basic requirements of ownership and management, again, as stated by the ordinance, the clerk then determines the priority order and hands that priority order over to Building and Safety. Then, in order of that priority, which is the order that they registered with under the initial ICO, then the collectives register with Building and Safety. That fee, the collective registration fee, is $688. In addition to that, the collectives will be required to pay existing fees to Building and Safety, which are not specifically recommended in our report because the fees are already established. Those include the pre-inspection fee, and the Building and Safety is also estimating that there will be a 3-hour minimum for work done by Building and Safety. That brings the total up, as stated in the first paragraph of our report, the total expected basic cost of getting this the collective up and running up to just short of $1,600. That doesn't include any additional construction permits and any other work that has to be done on building safety. But that generally covers what the basic collective will need to pay.
Okay. Could we have a report from the city attorney?
Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. Other than what was already stated, the ordinance does a few cleanup provisions related to the original ordinance that was passed. One is a definition of youth center, which was included to just narrow the definition and clarify it. We also changed some language to make sure that it was clear when the other ordinance became effective, because we use the term effective, we use the term operative, and so we want to make sure that it's clear, it's just clarification, that whenever you see the term effective date, it's referring to the date that the fee registration ordinance is adopted. It's not a substantive change. And just as a legal matter, the The fees, when an ordinance is adopting fees, you have to do a public hearing with notice, which is what's happening today, and the fees that can be imposed may not exceed the expected cost of implementing the city program, which each of the relevant departments have gone through, done the study, and provided the fee. The other changes to the ordinance just inserted the fee amounts that were stated, and then clarified that no collective may file a notice of intent with the city clerk if they have been convicted currently or within the past 10 years of a felony or crime of moral turpitude, or currently on parole or probation for the sale or distribution of a controlled substance. And that's been added in a couple of places just for clarification.
Okay. City Clerk, anything else like that? No?
We'll answer questions.
So we're covering all your costs, right? All right. Building and safety? Anything else like that?
Hector Buitrago, Department of Building and Safety. I just wanted to repeat that we've been working together for the last several weeks with the city clerk and the CEO and the city attorney, as well as the police department, to be able to implement the ordinance that was approved in order to come up with the fee that would be required to implement the ordinance, because there is a lot of coordination required amongst departments, and the way the ordinance is written is such that events have to happen in a certain sequence for a collective to be registered. So we worked all those logistical issues out and came up with the fees in order to get these collectives registered.
Police Department, anything else like that?
No additional comments, no.
Okay. Any questions for the staff before we go into public hearing from anybody?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. From reading the report, it appears that to the CAO that these are full cost recovery.
That's correct.
For each department. The one thing that we've been asked the most questions about in the community is that when these businesses go into place, are they under the same guidance as it relates to conditions or nuisance abatement if there should be an issue, or is this a separate category?
I think some of that may be subject to city attorney interpretation, but that's my understanding is that this certainly would not inhibit the city's ability to proceed with nuisance abatement.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. That's correct. At this point in time, the city's nuisance abatement provisions and state law provisions relating to nuisance apply to collectives just as they do to any other use in the city.
Upon entering business, would the city also have the ability to set conditions as we do for other?
If the city proceeds with nuisance abatement proceedings and determines a collective to be operating as a nuisance, yes, it could set conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Just before we get to public, yes, Councilmember Rosenau.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just timetables. I'm trying to understand the timetables. When we pass this ordinance, then 30 days after the clock starts ticking, what happens to the 800-900 out there? They all get a letter. What are the steps we go through, assuming this moves forward and goes to the council?
To begin with, as recommended in our report, first addressing the 186 or whatever the number was exactly.
I guess it was 134 or 137.
It's 187 right now. Holly Walcott with the city clerk.
Whatever the number is determined to be, however many people that registered under that ICO come through PD and the city clerk with the intent to register. Our intent, the live scan process, can take anywhere between a few days and 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how complicated the background report is. Right. If there's nothing on there, you have one name, one address, no arrests, it's going to take a couple days for Sacramento. If you have multiple names, multiple addresses, multiple arrests in multiple jurisdictions, that report can take much longer. Sure. Our recommendation on that end is that as soon as we finish here, the city clerk is going to notify the collectives on that original list of these proceedings. Not that anything has been adopted yet, but as somewhat of advice to those organizations that they should probably get their live scan process started, and we'll have an instruction sheet, information sheet, and the actual live scan form with the LAPD information already printed on it, so that they can begin that process, so that when it becomes time to go to the city clerk, that background review is all taken care of. For the others that are not able to register, I don't know the answer to that question. Hopefully somebody else has
Yeah, let's start with that one, which is the first question I have, which is there's roughly 900, if I'm not mistaken, or there's about of after the initial 187 we're in. When do they get notice to shut down, and how much notice will they get?
Okay.
That I don't know. Does the city attorney have an answer to that question, or I have to look back and find out for you?
I don't have that information. I'm looking through the packet. As you know, I wasn't the, or may know, I wasn't the attorney that was working on this originally. But I will say, just in relation to those questions, that right now we're dealing with the registration fees. So that is the subject of this ordinance.
No, I appreciate what you're saying there, but we obviously, before this comes to council, need to know the picture of those 700 or 900 that are not grandfathered within this concept of going forward, and they obviously need to know their time frame of action. I was assuming the letters would go out, they would be given 30 days notice, building and safety would follow up or send a letter. I don't know, but that is a critical question for us to appreciate at this point in time.
The city attorney is actually working on an overall strategy. The bulk of the enforcement, actually, in this case, is going to lie with the police department. In fact, Asha Greenberg from the city attorney has been leading that effort, and she couldn't be here today. It is my understanding that she intends to send cease and desist letters to those establishments that are not legitimate. And in the meantime, we're working on the overall strategy as to how we're going to attack this problem so that we can do it in a comprehensive manner.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make it clear, before this comes to council, or when it comes to council, I want an answer to that question, which is the majority of those clinics you see out there, obviously, 700 or 800 of them. I know in my neighborhoods, like the Venice area, at the present new definition of what neighborhoods could be used, it just pretty well gets rid of them all. Maybe at least one in one area, 4 in another area, maybe a total of 5 in a district that probably has had 80 or 90 of them. So I care about knowing that group, obviously, and the timetable and the procedures and the practices. And when it comes to this ordinance we're working on here, the clock will start ticking on a person's background check before they actually have to go forward with this, is what you're saying, or you're saying just to get that out of the way, right?
There is no specific timeline for the background check to begin. The timeline that the applicants have to meet is that once the ordinance is effective, and it's my understanding there's a 1-week window to file your notice of intent with the city clerk. The city clerk will not accept your application, your notice of intent to register, if your background has not been cleared by LAPD. Right. So there's some lead time that's going to be required from the applicants to make sure that gets cleared before the date they show
Councilmember
up.
Rosendahl, excuse me, we'll get that information for you by council when this goes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, any other questions from? I just wanted to ask, because this might come in public comment, but can any one of you give us just a quick overview of the process? I know you spoke to it in pieces, but can you go from A to Z?
Certainly.
Just give everybody the bird's eye view.
Yes. There are, I'll go over it briefly. If you want a little more detail, there are 2 different flowcharts attached to our report. One from the city clerk's process and one from the building and safety process that goes through.
And that could be made.
All the decisions.
And that'll be public information, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It is now. It can be found on the city clerk's website.
Okay.
initially, the first step in the process is the background review portion. The applicants will go. They don't actually come to the city for the live scan. There are live scan providers all over the state. There's actually a very easily accessible list of all of them online. You could just go on, if you Google Live Scan California, it's the first thing that comes up is a list of everywhere you can do that. So the applicants will go there with the form provided by the city clerk that has the LAPD's information on top of it. They fill out the form, they give their fingerprint, they send it, the provider sends that to Sacramento. Sacramento and the FBI put together their list and then deliver that list to the LAPD Narcotics Division. The applicant will separately mail their a copy of their application to the police department so the police department can match up the fee with the report that they get from Sacramento. Then LAPD will look at it, check for, as stated earlier, for the felony convictions in the last 10 years and any arrests related to controlled substance. One would assume that most of the applicants that decide to go through that process will probably clear it. Then the police department, once they've done that review, will send those names to the city clerk. And then the city clerk will have the list of everybody who's been approved by LAPD. The next step is for the applicants, during that 1 week period mentioned earlier, the applicants go to the city clerk's office to file their notices of intent to register. The city clerk will review that the collective meets the requirements. The requirements briefly are the applicant has to be on the initial ICO list. The applicant has to have the same owner and management that were named on the original list, and the applicant has to have operated continuously at the same location, or if they've moved, they have to show proof that they were forced to move. Once that process has been determined, the city clerk determines the priority order for the applicants to go to building and safety. That priority order is determined by the order that they filed under the initial ICO. Once that priority has been sent to building and safety, then starting with number 1 on that list, the collective will go to building and safety, pay their fee, the registration fee, and, excuse me, I got ahead of myself. Building and safety will then do a pre-inspection of the site to make sure that it complies with all of the different spacing issues, 1,000 feet from controlled uses, 1,000 feet from other collectives. Obviously, the collective in spot number 1 has a big advantage over the collective in spot number 186 for that, because collective number 1, there's no collectives anywhere in the city. They can find any use. They don't have to worry about the other collectives. That's where the priority really comes into to be a factor. Then once the work has been done on the reviewing the site, and then once the applicant has gone through all the work to get their actual structure all in compliance with all of the ordinance's operating requirements, then building and safety will give them clearance to actually begin operations as a collective under the ordinance as adopted. That timeline from when they come to building and safety to when they finish is 6 months or less. If they don't finish it in 6 months, then they go to the back of the line. That is, unless any of the other departments have anything to add, that's a brief summary of the process.
Thank you. Okay, so we can go into public comment now?
Very good. Staff can just stay in place. We're going to have the public comments. I'm going to call several up. If you can get in queue at the podium. Each person will have 2 minutes, and you cannot defer your time to another speaker. Barry Kramer. Oliver Summers, Don Duncan, and Norman Welch.
Good afternoon. Thank you for listening to us today. My name is Barry Kramer. I'm a resident of the City of Los Angeles. I'm a medical marijuana patient, and I am the operator of California Patients Alliance, a medical dispensing collective. I want to talk to you a little bit about, I think the fee schedule is fair. I have no problems with your fee schedule. I still have problems with the ordinance that it's attached to, though, and I'd like to address one of those problems, which is the alley abutment.
Mr. Kramer?
Excuse me, Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. The only thing that is on the agenda today is the ordinance that is adopting the registration fees, and under the Brown Act, that's what that's the only thing that can be discussed today. The underlying ordinance and the substance of it is not before this joint committee.
Well, thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Oliver Summers, and I will address the fee schedule. While I do agree that it is a decent and fair thing, you're asking about the live scan. We have attempted to go out and do our live scans, and we have been turned away because there have been things that the city has not complied with at this point in time. Second of all,
Could you explain to us what the city's not complied with?
We went down to the live scan offices, many of us, into all the multiple offices that are around town recommended by the city. We were turned away because we were told that we didn't have the number, that the LAPD was supposed to be prepared for us. They basically were not prepared altogether. And can I tell you as well, I've been making thousands of phone calls to you guys for clarification on anything, and you guys have nothing. Every time I just went up to the city's attorney's office after being recommended by Plum, Building and Safety, and Community Planning, went up to speak to Ms. Kaufman, Kaufman Messiah, I'm sorry, and they still don't have an answer for us. And I'm just looking for clarification, just like what Mr. Rosendahl was saying. I've done everything possible, and I just also like to amount that since the last time you guys have seen me, the amount of stress that you guys have put me under with this, I have developed a nice bleeding ulcer that was never there before. So I've compounded my sickness trying to compliance with you guys. So I just want you to know, you guys say it, I'll do it. That's what I do. I've done everything to follow the law. But please, just look with your eyes and common sense of what's happening around us right now. That's all I'm asking you. And the fee ordinance, again, it's fine. We agree with it. But look at what's behind the fee ordinance.
Thank you.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. I'm sorry, members, but under the Brown Act, we need to stick to the subject which has been agendized, which is the registration fee ordinance. So the public needs to be admonished that that is the subject that is before this joint committee.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question based upon the comments that were just made? So for anybody sitting up from the city up here on the table, the gentleman mentioned that he would go to a live scan organization and encounter some problems. Is that going to be cleared up by the time they need to? Is that a problem or not?
Holly Walcott with the Office of the City Clerk. We have not yet mailed out the instructions. We have planned to do so today. Attached to the instructions is the live scan form with all the information, including the number that we previously did not have. So we have where the information needs to be sent and the pre-filled out information from LAPD.
Okay,
this will be mailed out to all 187 collectives this afternoon.
So when they get that information and they go to a live scan, they shouldn't encounter that problem, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Don Duncan, a resident of Los Angeles and the California Director of Americans for Safe Access, the nation's largest medical cannabis advocacy organization. I want to acknowledge for you the hard work the staff did on the report. It's very thorough and very helpful. And I want to draw your attention to the last pages of the staff report, the flow chart, because every so often in that flow chart, you'll see a little arrow off to the side that says application disqualified. And this is the fundamental and underlying problem with this process, is that it's simply not workable. And I understand that the ordinance itself is not on the agenda, although we are considering amendments to that very ordinance. And I hope that when you're approving these very reasonable fees, that you'll also give some thought to the process that's outlined, including the new amendments, because it's simply not going to work for the vast majority of the legal collectives and cooperatives that have tried to play by the rules and tried to do this right. So please bear that in mind as this matter moves forward. And given that we're not addressing the more substantive issues, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Norman Welsh, Frank Chettel.
My name is Norman Welch. I'm a medical marijuana patient. All I'm asking is, when it comes to how this thing has gone over, please do it and keep in mind that we are not outlaws, we are not criminals, we are patients. Don't manipulate this thing to try to regulate us or fee us or whatever out of existence. It looks like the fee thing is on the right track. I just want you all to look to your heart and every breath you take on this one, okay? And I thank you for your time.
Frank Chettel.
Well, thank you. My name is Frank Sheftel. I'm born and raised here in California my whole life, in the Valley, in Hollywood, North Hollywood. I'm an operator of a collective. I'm on the city's list, and my concern is with going forward in notifying. You said you're going to be sending these things out, that you do notify us. In the past, your notification process has been stick it up on a wall and then you're notified, and it's up to us to do that. It's real important. With regards to the fees, I think that you're very reasonable, and I think a lot of people are surprised that they are as reasonable as they are, considering there's so much more in other cities. So I applaud you for being very reasonable in that and not making it so that a lot of these people can't go forward and operate their businesses. But I'm also concerned that, again, we know what's happening in this process as we go forward. The ability, like the gentleman said, it could take 3 days to get a live scan check. It could take 8 weeks to get a live scan check. That's not our control. But if we only have 7 days to do that, how is that going to affect us if we go in and we've applied for it and the people are saying, well, you're not going to have that, and you're giving us this very short window of opportunity? These are things you really need to take into consideration. It's hard enough in a regular business with the fee schedules and everything else and jumping through the hoops in order to make sure that we're running a business that is legal and in compliance with all of the things that you've set forward. Then we need to make sure that we have that in front of us to be able to do all of what you're telling us to go through. That line, then go to that line that we've been approved, and then we go to the city clerk, and then we go to the Department of Building and Safety. And, I'm number 187 on the list, and I'm on the list because the people didn't know what they were doing when I went in originally to apply. Otherwise, I would have been number 10.
Again, Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. Brown Act is state law.
And I'm talking about the fee schedule.
I'm not hearing anything about the fee schedule. What I'm hearing are general comments and concerns about the
how we're going to be able to go forward with the fee schedule and to make sure that we are notified, as they are saying, with the Department of Building. In other words, I'm discussing that. I'm not discussing
my
the ordinance.
suggestion is that people in the audience, if they still have questions regarding how the underlying ordinance works, is that they submit a letter to either the city clerk or their council members.
Great, and it's not a question that I have, respectfully. What it is I'm just putting my concerns out there that going forward, they're aware that in the past we've had issues, and that when they go forward, they make sure it's done.
Sir? Thank you. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, I was just curious. Is it true there's 7 days from the moment for them to get this clearance?
There's a 7-day period, but again, I understand the temptation, I understand the concerns and the issues, but we don't want to violate the Brown Act because violations of the Brown Act carry criminal sanctions.
So that's not the issue for me. The issue for me is it true that it is 7 days for them to do all this, even if it might take 6 to 8 weeks?
If I could interject, the 7-day period begins when the ordinance is, I don't want to get the wrong word, but when the ordinance is effective, which the council hasn't adopted the fees yet, so that 7 days hasn't started yet. That's the reason why we've recommended notifying people that they should get started on their live scan. There's still, of course, a relatively significant amount of time before that 7-day window will even
So basically what you said earlier was you have the form there now officially today. That form will go out to the 187 today. They then should start that process knowing full well that when this goes before the council, then there's another 30 days. They have a window of that 7-day not happening by going forward today.
Councilman Rosendahl, actually, they have till May 27th, because that's when the ordinance is the effective date.
There you go. So then that solves that whole issue.
So you have like almost 9 weeks.
Great. Good. Clarity. Okay?
Michael Bax, Brad Barnes, Wayne Avershaw, and Duke Smith.
Good afternoon, council members. I would just like to bring up one question about the Brown Act issue, which is materials that are presented to us for the first time, including these flowcharts, for the first time, related directly to this ordinance. I'm mystified why we can't discuss that.
The Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. The matter that's agendized is the registration fee. That's based on activities that each of the relevant departments will have to conduct, and it's their cost. So the fee is reasonably related to the costs. So to the extent staff has explained, these are the activities that we have to engage in order to register collectives. That's what the fee relates to. There is obviously an underlying ordinance, and it sounds to me like there are questions related to the underlying ordinance and how that's going to work, but that is different than what are the activities that each of these departments are undertaking in order to register the collectives, and is the fee reasonably related to that activity or those activities. That's what's on the agenda.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to address then specifically is whether or not that we are being serviced by the fees we are paying. The timely provision of information from each of the departments involved here to date has been lacking, and I hope will be addressed by the fees. I've sent architects down to building and safety to get information related to this fee ordinance. I've sent architects to the city clerk's office, and we are simply greeted with blank stares on very simple questions. For example, is a golf course a park? Okay, and we can't get answers. We need these answers in order to comply with the fee ordinance, all right? In order for me to authorize my board to write checks to this city, I need information. The city has to be able to provide us with that information. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Brad Burns. According to the code that I know of that's in front of you, if you punch that code into the live scan request, it's only going to do a DOJ request. It's not going to do the FBI background check also. I don't know of another supplemental code to go along with the code that's in front of you, but you might want to punch that code into a live scan request machine, because that code, as far as I know, like I said, is only for DOJ. The other issue I have is that in the code, in the fee schedule in front of us, it talks about, in order to comply, it talks about that the exterior sign cannot be lit internally, and that's in the actual fee schedule section. NASA has a national campaign to reduce the amount of light going into space. And because of this, all the universities, all the astronomy departments in every university are also behind this to reduce the amount of light. If you're going to keep this within the fee schedule, and not allow the light or the signs to be internally lit, then you're going to have a lot of light going up there like the billboards do, where they light it from the bottom and they push the light up into space to light the sign. So I really would I'd respectfully request for that one sentence to be removed so that we don't contribute to the amount of light going up into the atmosphere, so that our telescopes across the world can function correctly. I know you guys, some people might not, take that seriously, but it's a really, really a big problem with NASA. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no idea.
Good afternoon. I'm Wayne Avershaw. I'm an attorney. I represent GLACA, the Greater Los Angeles Collectives Association Alliance, comprised of all pre-ICO collectives, the collectives that played by the rules. With respect to the city attorney, we're talking about fees today, but what you're hearing is a sense of honest frustration from my clients, the collectives, who want to comply with the fees, want to comply with the ordinance, and simply don't understand it. And they're not alone. This is a complex, convoluted ordinance. The chair respectfully asks for an A to Z understanding of the flow chart. As a former council deputy, as an attorney, and as a county commissioner, the fee structure is very complex. So, as we move forward to understand the fees and the ordinance, what GLACA asks for, is a seat at the table. There's a working group of the 5 affected city departments, but anytime the city seeks to impose fees, whether they be on internet companies or DWP fees, the city rightfully seeks out the business that it seeks to regulate, seeks to impact those fees. Unfortunately, not in this case. The fees appear reasonable. They sound reasonable. Again, it's hard to understand all of them, but they appear reasonable. But as we move forward with fees and other matters, we hope that the council instructs to have a working group that includes the input of those businesses affected. That is fair, it is equitable, and it is in the best interest of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Duke Smith, and the last card we have is Sarah Armstrong. Is Duke Smith here?
I'm passing.
Pardon?
I'm passing.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah Armstrong, founding member of the working group. I have actually 2 questions today. If the city clerk is ready to mail out the forms we need for the live scan, could not the people here today who need them go to the city clerk's office on their way out the door and pick them up? We have today many, many very anxious
The answer is yes.
Yes, thank you. So we will go and pick up our forms. The second question is really very puzzling to me, and today we're talking about amendments. If the amendments adding fees to the ordinance are on the agenda, why is discussing the ordinance being amended a violation of the Brown Act? I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Well, what we're discussing today are amendments to the ordinance, correct?
That's right. Specific amendments relating to the definition of youth center, the effective date. There's some miscellaneous grammatical cleanup language, and the fees. That's it. And I'm not hearing anybody talk about the fees. I haven't heard a comment about the youth center. I do hear confusion and concern about the ordinance, but that is not the subject of this meeting today. And again, I would suggest if you have questions that you put them in writing and submit them to the city clerk or your council office, and then they can be addressed in an appropriate forum.
Thank you. Before I leave the podium today, I would just like to thank you all once again. I know you've expended a tremendous amount of energy and political capital on this. We're not done yet. I myself, though I'm not a member of GLADCA, helped to pay for the lobbyists because I felt this was a civilized and organized way to approach the council, and I hope that you will grant his request to be part of any sitting group. Thank you again for all your help, and I look forward to the day when this is all behind us and we never, ever have to stand here and ask as patients for the right to safe access. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Councilman Parks. Are there any other questions from my colleagues of the staff? Because I'm prepared to make recommendations and keep this committee moving. Any other questions?
Are you closing the public hearing?
Yeah, we're closing public hearing. Thank you, ma'am. Seeing none, colleagues, we have the following recommendations, and hopefully I'll get a second on these, but we would, one, move to approve the CAO and the city attorney reports and final draft ordinance. Two, instruct CAO, city attorney, CLA, and related city departments to report back in 6 months with any recommended revised registration fees if found necessary, given the implementation experience of registrations. And Councilman Krikorian would like to add, and further instruct the city attorney to report back with a proposed amendment to the ordinance that will provide for an automatic annual adjustment, annual adjustment in the fee based on the changes in the consumer price index or other appropriate measures without further affirmative approval of the council. Number three, instruct CAO, city attorney, CLA, and related city departments report back in 3 months with recommended annual regulatory enforcement fees, personnel requests to establish, implement, and maintain a designated and dedicated enforcement unit for the city's medical marijuana ordinance, including building and safety, LAPD, city attorney personnel. And then four, instruct the CAO, CLA, and related city departments report back with recommendations to move forward as soon as possible, meeting deadline for the submitting for the November, as soon as possible with a tax for medical marijuana collectives. So those would be the four instructions, including the additional instruction from Councilman Krikorian. And do I have a second on that?
Second.
Be a second, and
Excuse me, Terry Kaufman, Messia City Attorney's Office. I think the item regarding the amendment to the ordinance and the annual adjustment fees, we'll have to do that at council by motion, I think.
Okay, so
Because the other items 1 through 4 they already are pursuant to motion, and you're just instructing staff to come back. And I believe Councilmember Krikorian's is new. So
will that delay the process?
we can just do that at when this matter goes before the full
Okay,
council.
so we'll ask
But your
Councilman
instructions
Krikorian.
1 through 4 can stand.
All right, so we'll ask Councilman Krikorian to add that on when it comes before council. In terms of procedure, Roberto, does the Budget Finance do their own roll call and movement?
Sure, Councilman.
Councilman?
We'll do what we do in Budget and Finance. We'll move the report and support the Plum report.
Great, so we're all supporting
You're
each
just the
other
numbers.
here.
You're just the numbers.
All right, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have a yes vote on Councilman Huizar.
Yes.
And it's been moved in second, I believe, in Budget and Finance. That'll be the action of this joint committee. I'm sorry? Yes, and just to, on the record, I want to thank Councilman Greg Smith for waiving the item from Public Safety Committee, so it can come to council as soon as possible. So that'll be the action of these committees, and thank you, colleagues, and that concludes both meetings. Thank you very much.
Meetings ever.